We have a quorum, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to welcome everyone to the August meeting of the Union Township Planning Commission. We've had Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, please.
Clerk Cody.
Here.
Buckley.
Here.
Fuller is here. LaBelle.
Here.
Darren.
Here.
Milky. Shingles. Squatrito.
Here.
Webster.
Here.
So we have two that are absent.
Okay, thank you. So we last met July 17th. That was our regular meeting. You have minutes from the July 17th meeting. Are there any corrections to the July 17th minutes? It was a relatively brief meeting. So there's a motion by LaBelle to approve the minutes from July 17th.
Second.
Second by Cody. Further discussion? All in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have our minutes. Correspondence / board reports. There's two items listed under correspondence. Peter, do you want to address the status of those now, or?
Sure. We have the two items that we have. One is related to a special use permit that we have tonight. We'll be holding a public hearing and reviewing that, possibly hopefully making a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. With all special use permit, the site plan is required. For that site plan, we don't have all of the outside agency approvals yet. We do have approval from the Transportation Commission. We have an approval from the Fire Department. We don't have any approval in writing yet from the Road Commission, the Drain Office, Township Utilities. And so that's why I've put the site plan on as correspondence. It's not yet ready to be reviewed and approved. We will be able to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation on the special use. The other item is a site plan amendment to a site plan we approved last October. That is site plan 2017-08. That project, we again, like the other one, for this amendment, we have approvals from some agencies, others we do not. We do not have approval from the County Drain Office for Stormwater Management, the Isabella County Road Commission, and there's also sidewalks that are required to be shown on the plan across the entire parcel, and we don't have that yet, so we're working on those issues. So those are the outstanding issues as to why you see the site plan amendment under correspondence and then the site plan review 2018-07 under correspondence. Hopefully, we are working with the clients, we're working with the other agencies. We have all been in contact with each other, so we are working on getting what needs to be approved or what still is missing on the site plan so it can be approved on those plans.
So then in terms of current practice, our stance on those is that we're not considering them tonight?
Yeah, I would recommend in our past practice that until we have the approvals of all the agencies that we refrain from submitting the site plans for approval. It is the decision of the Planning Commission, but I would, as we typically have, strongly recommend that we refrain from reviewing it until we have all the approvals.
Is it appropriate that I might speak at this time?
I think we're still kind of just establishing what our agenda for tonight is going to be, so.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Now, we've at times done preliminary reviews.
Yeah, we've at times done a preliminary review where we'll review and look at sometimes a preliminary review is, I guess, conceptual. We haven't done very many preliminary reviews. I can recall doing one preliminary review for a medical office that was gonna be on, I believe, located around Second Street and Pickard Road. We still haven't seen any kind of final site plan for that one, and I believe we did one a couple years ago for a senior living facility, and that one we still haven't seen any kind of final for. So we've done a couple of preliminary reviews where we look at mostly the idea and conception.
And those come to us at the request of the applicant,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, they at the time you apply, you can apply for either a preliminary review or a final.
Mm-hmm. All right. And these were both final review applications.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So, any questions on those from commissioners?
Was there something I was supposed to ask, Peter? I was confused.
When we did the one site plan back in October for Riverwood, we didn't have our bylaws. Since then, we've had bylaws adopted, and one of the issues where it talks about recusal, if anybody has their bylaws, is on page 6. It states, the commission member owns or has a financial interest in neighboring property being within 300 feet of the subject property. We do have 2 commissioners. One of them is not present here tonight. Those are Commissioners Milky and Webster. They would be allowed to take part in the conversation, the dialogue, and ultimately vote, but before they do that, the commission would have to vote on whether they deem it as being a conflict of interest to which they would not be able to vote. So,
I live at 3767 Green Acres Drive, which is the subdivision just east of the Riverwood Golf Course. So that's why I'm within 300 feet.
Well, I'm just to the west, so, in the other subdivision.
So I must be closer. I'm closer to one of the holes. I forget which hole it is.
Part of my property actually butts up to number 6 on the blue course.
okay, well then, maybe,
Oh.
then, if that's
So-
the case, then you probably fall within 300 feet as well then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's the clubhouse or it's the property line, I mean, what's the designation?
It would be 300 feet from the border, or the property line.
Okay, and our property
If
lines.
you abut up to it, then,
Match.
Okay.
So people in that situation are specifically excluded?
well, what it says is conflict of interest. Before casting a vote on a matter in which a planning commission member may reasonably be considered to have a conflict of interest, the member shall disclose a potential conflict of interest to the commission. Failure of the member to disclose a potential conflict of interest, bylaws constitutes malfeasance of office. Before a member may be excused from casting a vote, a majority of the commission must find by an affirmative vote that a conflict of interest exists. Conflict of interest is defined as, and a commission member shall declare conflict of interest and abstain from participating in commission deliberations and voting on requests when, and it lists 1 through 4, number 3 stating the commission member owns or has a financial interest in neighboring property being within 300 feet of the subject property.
Okay.
So there's no question they are, so they need to.
I can only see that hole in the winter time when there's no leaves. I really, I have no, I'm not a member of Riverwood. I'm not really, I don't even consider myself on the adjoining the property, so I'm not sure what my conflict of interest would be.
Right.
In that.
I think we would define the conflict of interest as being your home value. There's a financial interest there.
I guess I just don't see it, but I guess if the rest of the commission believes that, that's fine, but
I don't believe that your decision would be swayed by that, but I didn't hear where there was an option it was listed as a conflict of interest.
You didn't hear where you thought it was? You didn't?
Yeah, I didn't hear that there was an option.
Well, I guess it comes down to a matter of whether or not financial interest is described as homeownership or home value.
I guess I interpret the four, I mean, based on what Peter read, I interpret the 4 items listed as being conditions that would definitely exclude someone. And then the rest of it is,
Yeah,
it
that's
would be
what I
at
was
our,
thinking.
at
That's how
our
I thought it
discretion.
too.
And what were could you read the 4 again, please?
The 4 are immediate family member, and then it goes on to list other such relations. Number 2, commission member has a business or financial interest in the property involved in the request, or has a business or financial interest in the applicant's company, agency, or association. The commission member owns or has a financial interest in neighboring property being within 300 feet of the subject property. And number 4 is there is a reasonable appearance of a conflict of interest as determined by majority vote remaining members of the commission.
This sounds clear cut. The commissioner owns property within 300 feet of the.
Right.
And so, okay, the part where you're reading where you still have to take a vote is, before anybody can be excused, the majority of the commission must find an affirmative vote that a conflict exists. So, the commission would still have to vote on whether number 3 is applicable or not to the commissioners. If there's any doubt, I can generate a radius around the property of 300 feet.
Well, I
If
think,
anybody
We have the majority, so we can have enough to vote.
right.
But to be clear, is there a vote tonight on anything? Or we have the ability to vote on the conflict of interest, but we wouldn't be voting on anything tonight regarding this, would we?
Right now, the conflict of interest would revolve on an item that right now is on correspondence. If the board does decide to review and act on it tonight, then there are 2 members that have stated that they would have a conflict of interest.
Right, I don't know what the action would be on a correspondence board report.
It
It's
would
not
be-
even a new business item, we have to move it to new business.
I could imagine, though, that having people who would eventually be excused from considering the actual item vote to put it on the agenda would be itself taking part of the consideration of that item. I mean, there may not be if there's not such a motion, then it's probably moot, but I don't know that would be.
Well, I guess it depends on what action we're going to take on the correspondence. If we're going to deliberate at all about the merit of this issue or not, I guess then.
Well, it's either gonna come up tonight because we do it, or the next time.
The next
So,
time, right?
there's still this issue whether in fact there's a conflict of
Well, my
interest,
point
whether
being
it's
is
tonight
that-
or the next.
Right, my point
Right.
being is that if there's a conflict of interest determined, then the commissioners that were excluded wouldn't be able to deliberate tonight
On that item.
on that item.
Yeah. My point was simply the act of moving to put it on the agenda seems to be
Right.
part of it. But of course, since it's listed under correspondence, unless there's a motion to put either of those items on the agenda, it's not on the agenda.
Which would be at the approval of agenda, which is our next item.
Right.
But there isn't plans available.
Yeah, we don't have.
We don't have
plans.
complete plans, so I mean, we're not even able to review anything on 8.5 by 11 sketch. So,
All right. So, we've discussed the correspondence. Board reports, Board of Trustees, anything for us?
On the September 25th meeting, we approved the professional services agreement with McKenna for the zoning ordinance update.
Hmm.
And that is all.
Great, thank you. Brian's not here, so I guess we'll not have anything from ZBA tonight. And then we have something from Sidewalks and Pathways on the agenda. Is there anything else you want to say in advance of that? Okay. Any other reports that I'm not thinking of? If not, then we'll move on. So approval of agenda. We have the agenda, and you've heard the discussion in relation to the correspondence, and so on. So I'll entertain a motion. Is there anything else that needs to be on tonight's agenda? If not, then I'll approve.
I'd like to request that the matter involving Riverwood be placed on the agenda tonight.
I think we set our agenda. There's going to be a public comment momentarily, but we set our agenda.
Sure.
So, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion is by Cody to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
Support by Darren. Further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the agenda as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have our agenda. So, we've reached the point in the meeting where we open public comment to items that are not on tonight's agenda. So, at this point, if an individual would like to address the Planning Commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda, they're invited to do so. We ask that you give us your name and address for the minutes, and limit your comments to 3 minutes and address your comments to the commission. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda?
I didn't mean to be a pest. My name is Michael Hackett. I'm an attorney with Martin Hackett of the Young Class here in Mount Pleasant. And we're here on behalf of Riverwood. We submitted an application about 3 weeks ago that included materials that we thought complied with the request. We've met with the last couple of items. We're met with the road commission for about an hour today, discussing a number of things, including the application. But Pat Gaffney apparently was still looking for his drawing placed on our engineer's drawing, or that's what Peter and I talked about today. So I wanted to indicate to you that I believe that we have complied with each one of the items that are necessary, and so we're ready to make a request. If you wish to place us on the agenda, certainly that's your option. Our request is twofold, and one has to do with approval of a road on the very east side of the property as an access road, instead of a drive that came across that would be the old driving range. The decisions were made back last fall to make the presentation in the form of the site plan that had been approved. We came to a realization that the drive would be more appropriately placed on the very east side of the property. There should be an overhead photo with everyone's packet, and it would show where that drive is. I would suggest that this is a relatively simple matter, and I don't think there is any issue of contention here, including the approval from the road commission. The other item that we wish to address has to do with the issue of the requirement of placing the sidewalk all the way across the golf course. And I'm not going to take an hour to do this.
Well, let me just,
I know I got 3 minutes.
well, yes, you had. Let me just interject that all of this material was in our packet, and I think all of us read it.
Okay.
The issue is simply that, according to township staff, who we depend on for setting our agenda, your application is not complete. Not all the approvals are there. And we used to be somewhat haphazard about this, and I think the township in recent years has attempted to be more consistent in terms of when things come to us, under what conditions they come to us. So, again, unless there's a motion from a member of the Planning Commission, it's not going to be on tonight's agenda, but it most likely will be on the September agenda, in which case we'll be happy to hear all this at that time.
Okay. Well, I wanted wanted you to think about it, okay? And so here, in my last minute of public comment, that our concern is being required to build a sidewalk for a half mile across the front of the golf course. The new shed is located on the very east side. I put a green sticky, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's easily identifiable in the drawing. The old shed that burned down was here, in a place that in 1960 was actually the clubhouse for this golf course. The point being that for the requirement of a sidewalk all the way across the golf course, we suggest it's inappropriate and to a level unnecessary. We reviewed the committee's reasons and criteria for purposes of a sidewalk, and the closest sidewalk that we can locate is down in front of the First Community Church, about 1.5 miles away. There is one at McGurk's new project here on M20, also a distance of a couple miles at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, yeah, we'd like your consideration in this matter, and I'm prepared to make a full presentation at a point, but I don't want to violate your agenda and rules by going too far into the public comment at this point. So if you have questions at this point, I'm happy to field them, and I'll defer to the Planning Commission for purposes of the presentation.
Okay. I will assume that we'll move on unless there is a question at this point, keeping in mind that we're likely to revisit this at a time when it's on our agenda. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Okay.
Other public comments on items that are not on tonight's agenda. There are 2 public hearings, so if you're here for the public hearings, you'll have ample opportunity to speak when we get to those. Any other public comments? All right, we'll go ahead and close that back up, 7:23. So we are to new business. We have 3 new business items. The first is a rezoning request for property located at 997 East Remus Road from agricultural to R2A. And I will let Peter introduce the topic.
So tonight we have we will hold a public hearing for a rezoning application. The rezoning application is for a parcel where the owner has planned to split the parcel. It is currently an ag parcel. I'll show you on the map. Currently, you have this where you can see the ag, and it is connected by the one residential lot located here. All these other residential lots are separate. They're all zoned R2A. This is zoned ag, and it is connected to this larger portion, which is all ag. And so the applicant is seeking a rezoning of just this portion of the property to be rezoned from ag to R2A, and to split it off from this larger piece, which will remain ag. And so that is the only request. They're not requesting to rezone the entire property from ag to R2A, just this portion of the property, and then it will be split off as its own parcel. And the zoning will match the zoning that you have on all the other parcels along Remus Road here. They will all be R2A. If the applicant were to split this parcel, it, although would be an acre, which meets the requirement for an ag parcel. Ag parcels have to be at least an acre in size. The width of the parcel is not 165 feet, and that is also required with an ag parcel. It must be 165 feet in width. So splitting this off, it would not be 165 feet. It does meet the width requirement for the R2A parcel, as do its neighbors to the west. And so that is the, before we have the public hearing, if anybody is curious as to exactly what this is requesting, that is the request. The entire parcel is not asked to being rezoned from ag to R2A. I can show you the zoning map, so you have an idea when I say the different zones. This is that same parcel I was talking about, where you can see the white is agricultural. It dips down, and that's where you have a single-family residential home. All these other lots contain single-family residential homes. They are R2A, that is the yellow. Ag is the white, and so the plan is to rezone this portion of the parcel, and it would be colored yellow, and then it'd be split off, become its own parcel, and this ag would remain and become its own parcel. So of course, if the commission has any other questions, I can go into more depth when we review it. But at this time, we could have our public hearing, which was scheduled and published and noticed in the paper. Residents within 300 feet were given notice of the rezoning application. And so at this time, it would be proper to have our public hearing.
Okay, thank you. So as Peter mentioned, all rezoning requests come with a public hearing. The public has an opportunity to voice their opinion on the request. So for the public hearing, we'll give everyone who wants to speak a chance to speak. We ask you to give us your name and address for the minutes, address your comments to the commission, limit your comments to 3 minutes. If everyone has had a chance to speak and someone wishes to add additional comments, we'll entertain that when we get to that point. So the public hearing on rezone request 2018-04 is open at 7:28. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on this application? Were there any written correspondence on this topic, or any? Were you contacted by anyone?
Nope, didn't receive any kind of written comments on the rezoning.
Okay. Sir?
My name is Richard Belnick, 811 East Remus Road. That is my mother's estate that we're attempting to split in order to dispose of, sell both parcels separately. I agree with everything Peter said. I originally proposed the split and was going through, and all of a sudden what department is passed?
The assessing department?
Assessing. She indicated to me that there was a problem with the split, so I went to Peter and we determined that rezoning would be the best fit for this, and so here we are. So that's just a way of explanation. That's all I have.
Thank you. Other public comments? Sir?
Tony Martinez, 965 East Remus. Oops. I know Dick, neighbor down the road. I know the house he's talking is right next to mine. I have a little problem with the lot lines. If Dad was alive, showed me where all the property line was at, took me around in my golf cart, showed me where it's at. I don't know who he hired to have it be surveyed, but they're off. They're off 6 feet. 6 feet in my yard. I spoke to Dick, says your dad said it was 2 feet from the culvert right here. I want to put a fence, and I don't want to put it in his yard, because if that's his yard, fine. But I might better go back when his dad was alive, the true owner of the house, to tell me these are the property lines. He's honoring the north end of the house, but towards M20, he's over. Now, what is the law about that? If you want to make a easement down through there to have cars or tractors or anything, how far would you have to be from the next door neighbor's yard before you can do anything like that? That's my question. option, and like, you know, I don't wanna go to court, but if I have to go to court for 6 feet, yeah, I will go. Because where he has it, his drive has a quarter of my drain field already in his easement. Had my TV dish in his easement. Now, my house was built in 1962. His dad would never allow the drain field to go into that easement or to his yard without being approved. So this is where I have a problem, you know. I won't have the right footage that I'm supposed to have if I go off his marks. I'm over to the next door neighbor beyond his tree. And there's a stake over there also where the property line there where mine goes both ways. How do we resolve that? I mean, you got a partial here that he wants to use, and I don't care if he does it, just don't take part of my land, you know, my front yard and stuff. So that's the one reason I'm here and stuff, what you guys suggest. Because the law said we gotta have, what, 160 feet road frontage? Cause if he moved his lot line where he has the mark, I lose my 160 feet. So, it's gonna be up to you guys to decide where it goes and how far, if you want to put a road, like, I have no problem to put a road. Just, he'll be over my drain field. And by law, since the house was built in 1962, I don't have to move a drain field. And I don't know who lives out in the country, but if you have a drain field, you're not supposed to drive over it, especially in the wintertime. Frost goes down, it will ruin my drain field.
Obviously, we're going to ask our township staff if they know anything about any of these issues.
Well, just to remind the board and everyone else, we're in the middle of a public hearing, and so anybody is allowed to speak. You're allowed to ask questions during the public hearing. However, I would just advise anybody in the public, I or someone else from the commission can answer any and all questions after the public hearing. But what we don't want is someone asks a question, we get an answer, and it goes back and forth. Right now, we're just receiving any kind of public comment. So.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have no problem if he wants to use that for an easement. Just move it back to the east where his dad said that's where the property line ends. That's all I'm asking, you know.
Okay, so we
Neighbors should never take neighbors to court or anything, you know, but when you lose half of your yard, then you gotta crap about it.
okay.
That's
So
all I wanted to say.
thank you for your comments. Is there anyone who's not yet spoken who would like to offer a public comment on this topic? If there's no one who has not yet spoken, I will recognize for additional comments Mr. Belting.
Yes, that what Peter has posted there is a certified copy of a survey by Schaefer. What's their name? I'm not sure right there.
Schaefer.
Who I contracted with, and he performed a survey. I was somewhat surprised by some of the results also, but I don't know when the last previous survey of that area was. My dad built a house there in 1951. I don't know. I've lived out there myself for all my life. I'm 71 years old, and I don't remember any survey there, but that's what I received from Schaefer Builders, or Schaefer Survey people, and I guess that's the best I can do.
Okay. Are there other public comments? Okay. So we thank the public for their comments. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:35. And so at this point, once the public hearing is concluded, as Peter indicated, it is up to us. I think we have 60 days, but we'll go ahead and have this discussion and work through to, ultimately, we need to make a recommendation either to the Board of Trustees, either to approve the request or to not approve the request, so we'll start our work on that. So, I guess to open it up, I'll just ask a question, which is what is the township's view? Is this what we assume to be correct? Is there, when there's a dispute or a question about property, when the boundaries of the property in question is in question?
Yeah, when there's a question of the boundary, the township doesn't get involved. We rely on the survey. If we have a neighbor that calls the township and states that my neighbor has, they've built a building or a fence on my yard, what do I do about it? It becomes a civil matter between the two neighbors. Both neighbors are welcome to, put money together to have one survey, or if one survey's been done, another is allowed to, get a competing survey to see if the results are, different. But ultimately, it's a civil matter between the two owners. The only thing I believe the zoning board of appeal could do is if there's a question on the, if the zoning map is incorrect, the zoning board of appeals can make a call there. But as far as when it comes to surveys, we don't have anyone who's a certified surveyor on the township staff, and so we can't make that call on whether the survey is accurate or not.
Okay.
What we have before us is a request of rezoning. It's clear to us which portion of the property wants to be, or is being requested to be rezoned. Now, whether the dimensions of that property have been surveyed correctly or not, I default to the surveying, whether it's Schaefer or any other surveyor that we've had come to the township before.
So base our decision that there's enough linear feet to zone it R2A. Not based on
Well, the
public
linear,
comment, based on data presented to us.
Well, and so what we have is, if you look, and everybody has a copy of the survey, and I can, let's see if I can enlarge it to make it clearer to anyone else. So the survey, the section of the parcel, 132 by 330, there is also a 21.47 feet that's going to be used for an easement for access back to this parcel back here. And so where I put in the memo 132 by 330, we would actually also include rezoning this 21.47, the easement for access as an R2A as well. So we want to keep that in mind. But 132, again, it's not 165 feet, so it won't meet the width requirement for a ag parcel. For a R2A parcel, it does.
R2A width is only 100 feet required, so.
So either way, whether disputed
Whether there's 6
feet
feet
or not,
here or there, it's.
Yeah, it wouldn't impact the rezoning.
But does the rezoning, is the rezoning what makes that easement required because the agricultural parcel is now landlocked from the road? Or was that easement already there?
No, I don't believe, I can default to the applicant if they know more on it. I don't believe the easement was existing there. So yeah, this would be landlocked until, for example, if, I know there's agricultural to the east and to the west, if, say somebody wanted to buy this portion and combine it to the other, then that would be, they would have access. But until something like that would happen, yeah, an easement would have to be given so that this parcel is not landlocked.
Pete, is there an easement I'm just going by this picture.
There, I do see
But
an
it looks
easement.
like an easement all the way out to the
On our,
road.
yeah, on our zoning map, it looks like there is one back there on the other side. It's not showing on here, of course, that's further down to the left. Get that.
Phil, can we recognize Mr. Belnick? I think he has something to offer.
Oh, yeah, I'll recognize, the applicant for a brief comment.
The easement, is actually what Mr. Martinez is referring to as taking some of his yard. It has nothing to do with the parcel, 132 feet. 132 feet, 20 foot of easement. So I don't think his complaint is with the parcel being rezoned. You know, I don't think it's got anything to do with that.
Right, that was my understanding as well, but I think the question is if heavy farm equipment is gonna be driven over that easement, and if that's where his drain field is his drain field gonna be damaged by the act of driving over that?
The easement is there. My buyer, or the person I agreed with verbally to agree, owns 80 acres on the west adjacent and 120 acres on the north. He's seeking that parcel to straighten his field out a bit more. It would be Mark McDonald who's gonna purchase that, so he will never use that easement, to my understanding.
Is it true that there's an existing easement then?
Pardon me?
Is there an existing easement as shown on the parcel map here that we're looking at?
If you look to our zoning map, there is, and that's what I would assume that this is. It is clearly too small to be a parcel, and we don't have any record of this, and so I'm guessing that is an easement on this side. The parcel that we're looking at is here.
I actually own that sliver there. That's next to my house. I'm just to the east of that. So I actually own that. It belongs to me, it's been deeded to me. It wasn't recorded at the time of this. It just recently been recorded at the Register of Deeds. So, that's smaller than the 20 feet even, so it's not ever been a field easement, so.
Is there a reason why an easement, well, I guess my first question is this something the planning commission can deliberate? Can we rezone, the parcel in the absence of rezoning the easement? I mean, can we even, if we can't deliberate on this or make a decision on the easement issue, there's no point in getting too deep into it anyways.
But the easement's not part of this application.
Right.
No, there's no, and I'm,
So why are we considering the easement?
We shouldn't be.
Yeah, we're not considering the easement, we're considering the 132 feet west of that
East of
line.
that.
right, that's my question is,
The easement doesn't,
doesn't factor into anything that we can deliberate on anyways.
right.
So that 21.47 feet will remain agricultural even if this application is approved?
Yep.
It would be just like that other one further to the west. Although that one is shown as,
Shown as yellow.
is it yellow, do you know?
That's because he just had it changed, is what I heard.
That one?
The one on the yes, that one,
The one.
Peter.
Hmm.
It sounds to me like they just recorded it and attached it to one of those parcels. Yeah, to
Yeah,
the
but
one on the west side.
Is this picture of aged before he did that? I mean, this isn't, you don't update this. How old is this particular?
This map would have been, I believe the last time we updated would have been last year.
Either way, that's not part of this.
No, it's not, but your comment is, he just did it. It's like, well, yeah, but this has always been that way. Before he,
The accuracy of the map would have to be in question at that.
correct,
Correct.
correct.
I guess my question, maybe just for curiosity, is whether or not the easement that's adjacent to the parcel we're considering is an easement that already exists, or that's an easement that's gonna have to be requested? Is that something
I
that,
mean, Is it an easement or is this property shaped like that?
I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
the property would be shaped like that. It's not even an easement between two property owners.
right.
The gentleman who's buying the north piece will have a little 20-foot sliver going out to 20.
Right. So, I have a question, I'm sorry.
Please.
Has the, it seems like we deliberated on something similar to this relatively recently, where the approval of the rezoning was contingent upon the successful separation of the land? Is that something that we have to consider? If it's gonna be split?
Well, technically, even if it wasn't split off,
We can still
if we were
rezone
to just
it.
do a split zoning, this portion of that property would still meet the requirements of an R2A.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
I think the other one, there was an issue about a building, and so it had to be,
yeah,
there was something
Adjoined,
that made
yeah.
it required.
right.
I, from a rezoning perspective, I don't think that there's any debate. I mean, it seems to fit, and I'm not sure there really is, this, from, until that time, it was, well, this is a no-brainer. This, of course you would make sense that this would be an R2. Now, if in fact, we don't have anything to do with the surveying, that's not our issue. It just really comes down to the rezoning, and it makes total sense to me.
Right.
From it's consistent with our master plan, and it would be conforming. So I would make a motion that we approve the rezoning request.
Second.
So the motion, which I'll slightly rephrase, is that we recommend to the Township Board that they approve the rezoning request. The motion was by Webster, the second was by Cody. Further discussion? So just to kind of bring this full circle, anyone who feels aggrieved by the, well, of course it goes to the Township Board, it's not the final decision tonight, but anyone who feels aggrieved by something like that, as you said, they have the option of doing their own survey. They have the option of entering into discussions with the owners as to whether that easement is actually going to be used at any point in the future. There's been a suggestion that it won't be. There are other recourses for a person to pursue who has concerns about the use of that easement. Okay. Other discussion? Motion is to recommend to the Township Board that they approve the rezone request of that piece down there along M20 from Ag to R2A. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So that will go forward to the Township Board. The next item will also involve a public hearing. It's a special use permit.
Mr. Chair, I need to ask the commission, I work for a developer who builds mini storage, runs and operates mini storage. I'm not involved. I have no financial gain. I need to just declare that to see if the rest of the commissioners believe there'd be a conflict of interest in that.
So you work for a different company that builds mini
That
storage.
owns and operates mini storage.
But not this one.
It's not, no, not this one.
Okay.
And they're not involved in the
What-
construction of this one?
When they build new mini storages, yes, I'm involved in that, like preparing the land, pouring concrete. But as far as rental, leasing, any of that, I'm totally uninvolved.
But you're not involved
But
with
you're not,
building this particular.
No.
yeah, you're not
Nope.
involved with building this one,
No,
only
but I
your
work for a
companies.
person that owns and operates different mini storages in the township.
I see no conflict.
Yeah, as Peter was pointing out to me, to go back to our famous 1 through 4 here, this fits neither category, none of the 1 through 3. It's not a cut and dried, and so this is one of those where it is in fact the discretion of the Planning Commission as to whether a reasonable appearance of conflict of interest exists or not.
So now that it's been brought up, do we have to vote on
I think yes. Further discussion though, or any questions for Alex? So,
How was that?
how, have we done this
how's that
with
motion?
motions? I don't even remember. Okay. So I'll ask for a vote of those who believe that a reasonable conflict of interest does exist with respect to Alex and our consideration of this special use permit. All those who believe that it to be true, please say aye. All those who believe that there's not a reasonable appearance of a conflict of interest in Alex's consideration of this matter, please say no.
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 Okay. I clearly believe that the commission has voted not to support a need to recuse yourself.
Okay.
Okay, so we have special use permit 2018-04, Mission Road Mini Storage, 5353 South Mission Road, owners DeShano Development. And so I'll once again ask Peter to introduce the topic and we'll move into the public hearing.
And so we have a property here that this commission is familiar with. Earlier in this year, we had a rezoning application for this property. The rezoning application was to extend its B4 portion of the property that is zoned B4. The property is currently split zone between B4 and Ag. That application to rezone was ultimately, well, first by this board it was recommended against, and the Board of Trustees ultimately decided to go with the recommendation of the board of this planning commission in not choosing to further expand the B4 portion of the property that was Ag. The reasoning being that there was existing B4 property that was not utilized, that could be used, and that also the master plan, the future land use map, did not support extending a rezoning that far to the west, or excuse me, to the east. The applicant is now before us again, taking those decisions in consideration, and they have now proposed, they currently have 6 self-storage units. They have proposed to build 3 more additional self-storage units. They will be located entirely on the B4 portion of the property that is currently B4. There was a site plan and a special use done for this original project, I believe in the early 2000s. I don't have the memo in front of me to look at the exact date. And that was granted, and the site plan at the time showed only 6 units. Those 6 units have been built. They were approved to be built. And so now this would be this is why we're having a new special use hearing, is because at the time they were approved to build 6 units, and they built them where they were approved. Now they're asking to add 3 more additional that were not disclosed at the time when the original special use was approved. And so we had a notice in the paper. Owners within 300 feet were given notice of the public hearing tonight. Get a visual here to show you the current units. And so you have a site plan before you. We're not acting on that site plan tonight, but it gives you a visual idea of what they are proposing. You have the 6 units that are located here, and they're proposing to build 3 more in the vicinity of the area that would not extend out into the currently ag zone portion of the property.
I just want to ask, so I can understand better, both in that picture and in the drawing that they've submitted, I count 10 buildings. right, the four corner, I see the 6 in the middle,
Oh.
but there's 4 corners.
Yep, I apologize. Yep.
Were those part of the original construction, or were they
Yeah.
added later?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now, when the original special use permit was granted to this parcel, generally you don't see a site plan during special use permit request.
I didn't see any mention when I looked back in the records of that it was, you could use the entire parcel or entire B4 portion for any number of self-storage units. And so in past practice, you have to go by with what was shown on the site plan. If what the
Okay.
site plan showed was we're only gonna put self-storage units in this area, and there was no mention of possible future self-storage units in this area or that area, you have to go by with what was shown.
Okay.
So it's not by parcel, it's by parcel and site plan.
Unless when you approve it, you specifically state that you're allowing that use for the entire parcel or the entire portion of that parcel.
Show some sort
And that
of
would,
phasing or
yeah, and that would
something.
typically be indicated on the site plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
But you don't believe that the records from the original application, would they still exist?
I still have the existing plan from 2001.
You do, okay. All right, any other questions for Peter? If not, then we can proceed to the public hearing. Once again, this is the public's opportunity to give their opinions to the Planning Commission in advance of our consideration of this request. Everyone who wants to address the commission will be given an opportunity to do so. If everyone who wants to speak has spoken, we'll entertain second go-rounds from individuals if need be. Once again, give us your name and address for the minutes, and address your comments to the commission. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. The public hearing on special use permit 2018-04 is open at 7:58. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on this application? Sir?
I'm Gary Duchesneau with Duchesneau Development. We just have had a good success with that project, and we'd like to take advantage of the vacant space and build more rental units if we're allowed to do so. So just that simple.
Thank you. Other public comments? Once again, were there any comments received by any other means on this?
Nope, I did not receive any written correspondence or comments on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Other public comments? Going once? Going twice? Hearing no other public comments, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. We'll thank the public for their comments. So this being a special use permit, we have our list of criteria in the zoning ordinance. Do you have the page memorized?
Yep. Well, it's 30-3.
I figured one of this would. So yeah, if you have your zoning ordinance, section 30-3 or page 30-3, and we typically go through these one by one, and I'll ask if there are any concerns, because just to remind everyone, we have to make a recommendation on this to the Board of Trustees, and if there is by any chance a negative recommendation, it needs to be justified, and so we need to be able to point to specific reasons for such a recommendation. So if there's no objection, I'll start at the top. So First is, the special use shall be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained in a manner harmonious with the character of adjacent property and the surrounding area.
It's harmonious with the area.
Right.
It's a B4, they already have self-storage on there.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Number 2, the special use shall not change some of these are semi-redundant. The special use shall not change the essential character of the surrounding area.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. The special use shall not interfere with the general enjoyment of adjacent property.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. The special use shall not be hazardous to adjacent property or involve uses, activities, materials, or equipment that shall be detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of persons or property through the excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, odor, fumes, or glare.
I don't see it
I
being
agree.
hazardous.
I don't see a problem.
Yeah, I would imagine the addition of more storage units wouldn't change really what's going down there already.
Especially when one is already within they're proposing it's already within
Boundary.
The
the
footprint.
area, and there's only 2 outside the footprint.
Okay. Number 5, the special use shall be adequately served by essential public utilities and services, or it shall be demonstrated that the person responsible for the proposed special use shall be able to continually provide adequate services and facilities deemed essential to the special use under consideration. The said facilities or services shall be approved by the Central Michigan District Health Department.
It's not even applicable.
Probably not applicable since they're not
Right. No
water and sewer and so on. When deemed necessary by the Township Board or Planning Commission, the use shall be adequately screened by distance and landscaping to protect the rights of all adjoining property.
I don't see that, I mean, if there's a screening requirement, but by looking at even the past ag, I don't even, there's trees, there's a south residence, is that what I'm seeing on Mission?
Looks like it,
And trees there, and
yeah.
Natural
I'm not sure what it is that we're screening.
Right. I
Well,
believe there's a wooden fence around the existing facility.
There is on Main Road on Mission, right?
Right. So that's all you're looking at.
Does the fence go around the entire
Doesn't go all
property?
the way around, does it?
Does the fence go all the way around the property?
Yes.
Oh, yes, it does.
And it looks like
Okay.
they plan on extending it, but it's
Mhm.
not called out on the plan, but it's showing its fence around. Construct new fence.
Again, this is also, there's another section in our, section 30 that there's items we'll review specifically for self-storage units, and it talks about screening requirements. Again, a lot of that stuff we can also address when we are reviewing the site plan.
Okay. All right. Number 7, the Township Board or Planning Commission in connection with approval of any application may require reasonable undertaking by the applicant to guarantee and assure by agreement, including a performance bond to be posted by the applicant or by some other reasonable surety arrangement at appropriate stages of the plan development, that the development will be executed in accordance with the approved plan. That's,
More of a statement, isn't it?
it's a statement, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
kind
more
of
of a
between them and the township, I
Right.
guess. Number 8, that such use will be an asset to the township.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I hear no disagreement, so. Requirements and conditions of each individual special use permit shall be complied with regardless, unless otherwise mentioned within this section. Again, that's a statement. Any special use permit may be revoked by the Union Township Board upon recommendation of the Union Township Planning Commission whenever the operation fails to comply with any of the required conditions or may be subject to the penalties of this ordinance. and then reminders. Approval shall be valid regardless of change of ownership. In other words, it stays with the land. And if development authorized does not commence within 1 year, the permit may be reconsidered or voided by us. So you said there were some special considerations for
For self-storage units specifically, you'd refer to section 30-14, or should I say page 30-14. It's actually section 30.4U, if we're going to be specific, titled Self-Storage Buildings. The first item is allowed as a special use provided they're located in a B4 or B5 district. They are. Provided that they shall be architecturally designed so and not to have a flat roof and shall instead have a mansard, gable, hip, or gambrel roof design. That is something that we can check more with the site plan. Provided that they meet all required conditions of the B4 or B5 zone. All entrances and exits shall be designed in accordance with the Isabella County Road Commission requirements. Again, these are things that we can check with the site plan. Number 5, greenbelt planning and screening will be required so as to obscure view from any adjacent residential district. Screening will also be required where property is within 250 feet of any residentially zoned property. Screening shall consist of non-deciduous trees not less than 3 acres or 3 feet, in height, planted and maintained in live condition not less than 15 feet on centers. 6, maximum length of any self-storage building shall be 250 feet. No storage of combustible or flammable liquids, combustible fibers, explosive materials as defined in Fire Prevention Code. Toxic materials shall be permitted within the self-storage buildings or upon the premises. No storage outside of the self-storage building shall be permitted. The use of the premises shall be limited to storage only and shall not be used for operating any other business, for maintaining or repairing of any vehicles, recreational equipment, or other items for any recreational activity, hobby, or purpose other than the storage of personal items and business items as herein before set forth. And finally, all entries, drives, and parking areas shall be hard surfaced and shall provide drainage and grading to move stormwater away from the storage unit. So again, a lot of 1 through 10 is either self-explanatory, obvious at this point, such that it is in a B4 zone. Others we can check with the site plan, and so these are also helpful criteria for the applicant to make sure that all of these requirements are shown and demonstrated on the site plan before it can be approved.
So we're not considering the site plan tonight, though, correct?
No, what I would recommend is if, well, in my memo, I've recommended that we approve the special use permit on the condition that a site plan is approved.
I just want to ask, just because it's there in front of us, that in that list that you just read, number 7, which is the no storage of, dangerous things. I get combustible or flammable liquids. Combustible fibers, are they talking about textiles or are they talking about something else? Because textiles would include clothing, would it not? I mean, those are combustible under normal circumstances.
Under normal?
Well, if they get lit. I guess I just wonder what combustible fibers is intended to represent.
I would take it to assume that clothing was included, but I would guess that the spirit of that phrase would be more towards the storage of like 500 reams of paper, that sort of thing, which would be a heavily increased fire load for any building.
Okay.
And so that's, at this time, this would be an applicable question, as this is something that we typically wouldn't see on a site plan. So if anybody on the commission has a question for the applicant on any idea of items that would be stored, it would be appropriate to ask them if you desire.
Well, I'll just ask this question, just for a point of general information. Given that the township zoning ordinance says that no storage of combustible items of certain types are permitted, what steps does an operating self-storage facility like this take to prevent or monitor whether people are storing things that would be in violation of that, just in general?
It's clearly in the lease. We use I guess what we call a standard lease that's used throughout the nation. And those words are clearly in there that that's not allowed. Now, we operate quite a few mini storage units, and do we inspect the contents of all of them? No, we don't. So I mean, virtually all we can do is, like any storage company, we can tell people you can't do that. But if somebody drives in the middle of the night and stores a can of gas, we probably can't control it.
Okay. So, other questions or comments on this special use permit application from commissioners?
Peter, do you know the distance from the mini storage to Wing Road there? I ask because in terms of the greenbelt planting, it says it will be required if it's within 250 feet, is the way I read it, a residential zone property, rather than may be required.
And so it's reading that if it's not the property, it's stating that if the greenbelt planting will be required as to obscure view from any adjacent residential district. And so that doesn't, if it's adjacent to a residential district, there is no measurement. Screening will be also required where property is within 250 feet of any residentially zoned property. And so that doesn't state the location of the use. It would be 250 feet of any residentially zoned property. And in this case, if I look to the zoning map, well, from where you can see, this is the location of the property. Pink is B4. R4 is residential. There's residential homes on Wing Road, but they are zoned agricultural, not residential. And so it wouldn't count the 250 feet of any residentially zoned property or any residential district. However, you could still require screening based on the section 1 through 10 to make sure that it's harmonious and the adjacent enjoyment of adjacent property does not interfere. And so although it wouldn't outright state that it has to be screened, it would be within your right to ask for a condition of screening.
So we're not required to, but we could ask for a screening.
Yeah, in this case, they are not required to by zoning ordinance, but you could require it as a condition.
Okay.
That would be done at the point of recommendation of the SUP. All right.
I'd like to
Mike?
make
Is
a
that
comment.
the SUP, or is that the site plan?
Well, what would be helpful is if you make it a recommendation now on the SUP, a condition that I've recommended is a site plan is approved. And so if you make it a condition now, it gives them the opportunity to demonstrate that on the site plan, if you desire any kind of screening.
Mike?
I'd just like to thank the owner for going back and developing the rest of his property, before he moves on to the adjacent property. I think that was very good.
I'd like to take a motion to recommend to the Board of Trustees recommendation to approve the SUP 2018-04 on the condition that a site plan is approved.
Support.
So the motion was by Webster as stated, to recommend to the Township Board that they approve SUP 2018-04 with the condition that there ultimately be an approved site plan. And the second was by LaBelle. Further discussion?
I'm generally supportive of this SUP. I appreciate that the applicant has come back and given us a plan that we can work with. My only question, I would be curious if the commission would consider amending that motion. My only concern is that we had several residents that came to the prior discussion on this topic that were along Wing Road, and voiced concern over this. So my question would be whether or not Commissioner Webster would consider an amendment that would require screening only on the west side, or no, I'm sorry, the east side.
I would not consider that as part of my motion.
And so this is north, this is south, east, west, and so by east side, Commissioner Buckley is stating what would be the back.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a visual. That would be this side.
I would not.
Which is currently,
Wouldn't change my mind.
can't really tell if it's being actively farmed or not. It looks like it's either open grassland or it's clearly not.
It's it's currently screened by a fence, and so I guess for a clarification on Buckley's amendment, is Commissioner Buckley asking for screening of a fence or for some kind of vegetation?
The reason I was suggesting it was because with the addition of additional buildings, the concerns that the residents had expressed were issues of lighting and stuff like that. I mean, I know we have a lighting ordinance that's required. The fence goes so high, but a mature green belt would certainly stand much taller.
But we're only requiring trees 3 foot tall.
They're requiring evergreens that
3 foot tall, it said right there.
Yeah, but you can't plant an evergreen that's going to stay 3 foot tall. That's the minimum.
Right, in 12 years it'd be above that. Be quite a while before that screening would be effective.
How tall is the current fence? Out at the east end of, okay. Is your current plan to build a similar fence when you move it back?
We would relocate the existing fence. And I understand the concerns of the neighbors. We built some of the homes 15 years ago, and they are a long ways away. And that farm, that land is actively farmed. And of course, if there's corn growing there, you can't see that at all. We're quite a ways away, but you know, we could plant some 3-foot trees, and you don't. But in a few years, they get to be big trees. But not opposed to that.
I'm not looking to hold up a motion. I was just curious as if the commission was open to the idea.
I'm not
I think
here.
the motioner does not want
I'm
to.
not
She's not-
willing
she
to
doesn't
change my
want
to- Yeah,
motion.
so yeah.
You know,
No.
you wanna
Okay.
vote it down and
Yeah.
create another motion, you can do
No.
that.
Correct. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. A motion is to recommend approval with the single condition that an improved site plan eventually be obtained. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So you're on to the Board of Trustees, and then hopefully we'll see a site plan at some point. Okay, so back to our agenda. The third item is recommendations from the Sidewalks and Pathways Committee. So you have in your packet, it's numbered pages 17 and 18 at the lower right corner. Well, you have a copy of what we already approved, which was their guidelines dated March 12th. And then what we're specifically being asked to consider tonight is a list of properties that have previously received waivers that would be called in because they are on streets that have been designated as priority, or I guess what the plan calls designated streets. So Denise, do you want to talk about this?
And the only reason why this is brought forward to the Planning Commission is so that you can review what we are making a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. And it's just out of courtesy to the Planning Commission that the committee is bringing this forward, so you are aware of what we are making a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. And as you look at the list that is being provided, we've looked at the criteria, the identification of our designated streets. We identified those parcels which were provided waivers, and recommending to the Board of Trustees that on those parcels that they be called, and as stated in the policy or procedure is that we would then call that in and give the applicant and working with the staff the sidewalk to be constructed within 2 years, as stated. And then we looked at the other parcels that were given waivers, and as you look at the map, and we using our criteria for granting relief, we as the Sidewalk Pathways Committee went through those and found that at this point we do not recommend that those waivers be called, of those parcels outside the designated streets. So we are bringing this forward just for just to keep you informed.
Can you show us where these parcels are at, Peter?
Yeah, the provided in the packet for you, and Denise did a great job of summarizing why we're even having this item. If you recall, it was this commission, according to our sidewalk committee, Planning Commission shall designate committee to plan and prioritize new construction of sidewalks and pathways. This commission did designate that committee and fill it. The Sidewalks and Pathways Prioritization Committee will meet as needed to review the plan, and here's the key, make recommendations to the Township Board. And so they were ready to make a recommendation to the Township Board. However, as a courtesy, comments have been received back from this commission to the Sidewalk Committee. When this sidewalk policy was developed, there were comments from the commission of unsatisfaction that the policy did not come at least to the Planning Commission first as to get their input. And so they are extending the olive branch and asking for your review and input of their recommendation. They will take your input back at their next meeting and consider any input you give. In your packet, you have, just in case anyone did not have it, you have a copy of the sidewalk policy that has been approved. It is now official policy of the township. You also have two maps that the committee has been working with. One is dated October 20th, 2017, and it is titled Union Township Sidewalks and Sidewalk Waivers. On that map, it has in the legend the color orange, and that it states parcel with sidewalk waiver. Down below, you have the parcel ID number and a property address when available to help you identify those orange parcels. And so it is off of that map that the Sidewalk Committee was able to determine which parcels have any kind of waivers from past site plan reviews, of course, when the term waiver was still applicable. The second map that you have is dated April 4th, 2018, and it is titled Union Township Sidewalk Implementation and Prioritization. This map goes hand in hand with the sidewalk policy. And so the sidewalk committee, when they were reviewing their which parcels were with waivers to be called in, they first looked at the waiver map. They saw the orange parcels. They compared the location of those parcels to the prioritization map. And the prioritization map, in the legend, it has a color green for existing sidewalks and a color purple for street priorities. The sidewalk committee has recommended any of those orange parcels that were located, that they found located on the purple streets, known as street priorities or priority streets, those waivers would be called in. The waivers that at this point would be located on parcels that were not located on the purple streets, their recommendation is that those waivers would not be called in at this time. And so those were their, they looked at the waivers as two separate topics. One, parcels that were located on the purple priority streets, and then waivers that existed on streets that weren't on the purple priority streets. And they've listed them out. I put them in your memo for you. 2865 South Lincoln Road, 2476 East Remus, 2812 South Lincoln Road, parcel ID 1401740008-03. That is a parcel located near 2812 South Lincoln, but it is there's no address. 4445 East Bluegrass Road, 2260 East Remus Road, and 2420 East Broomfield Road. So far in their recommendation, they are recommending that these 7 properties be called in. They have not made a specific recommendation of recommending to the Board of Trustees how long to take those being waived in, whether you want to tackle them within a 3-year period, 2-year period, 1-year period. They have not yet decided to categorize them as one being more important than the other. And so this is simply what they have come up with, and as a courtesy, they are looking for any, if any, input anybody on the commission has to offer.
Okay, so the item's open for discussion.
I do like to see, I like what I see here in terms of the street priorities on the map. You can tell that it's starting from the inside and kind of inside out, which I think is appropriate. As those priorities are filled in on the street priorities, that that kind of enables and provides some justification for continued outward growth. So that way we're filling it, growing it, I guess, organically. I have a question out of curiosity. When we call in a waiver, and whether it's a 1-year or 2-year, 3-year time period that we give the landowner to address the sidewalk, what is the process? How do we ensure that they adhere to that? I'm only thinking of a parcel that we called in, or that we recommended to be called in on West Remus, M20, that I don't see any sidewalk for yet. And I just didn't know what the process is for kind of enforcing that once we create the waiver, or once we call in the waivers.
Well, for a waiver, and there are some waivers where the commission has made a condition of you have a waiver until so many months or so many years, and once that elapses, you have to construct the sidewalk. Other times waivers were given with the idea of when the township deems necessary, and sometimes waivers were given without any mention of even when the township deems necessary. In those two latter cases, it's a matter of contacting the owner, letting them know that you were given a waiver at one point. The township has called that waiver back in, and we simply work with the owner with the understanding that they may not have been planning on putting a sidewalk in that year or the next year, and so it's just a matter of working with them to getting down a timetable that we both can agree on and work towards. The one property that you had mentioned in your comment west of Lincoln, or excuse me, east of Lincoln Road, here we called in a waiver for Isabella Community Credit Union. We have been working with them this year, and we still are on target to have that sidewalk finished this year. So it's not there yet, but we still we are working with them, and we're on target to have it finished this year. So
I guess where I was going, the conclusion of that thought process was, if someone chooses to simply not work with us, does our code or does our ordinance address what we do in that event, or do we need something either from the sidewalk committee or in our ordinance overhaul that addresses that?
Well, there's nothing the sidewalk committee could do with that. Again, it's just a body that makes recommendations, and so it's the.
Well, I meant like a recommendation for what action to take or something.
Well, and in this case, it's ultimately the board of trustees that would call the waiver in, and so if we were not able to work with the person, the board of trustees, without even need of a recommendation, may have their own ideas of how they would want to enforce it, or
Okay.
That's something the board of trustees would have to address if
Okay.
it comes to something like that.
According to our policy, and I understand what you're saying, Peter, is that we have made the Sidewalk and Pathways Committee did recommend that when we call waiver in, it is that the sidewalk will be constructed within 2 years. It states that in the policy. So it is hopeful that the township, as we contact these particular individuals, that their waivers are being called that within 2 years that a sidewalk would be constructed. Unless the township board, decides differently, but that's certainly what we would hope, that we would have given them 2 years in order to do that.
And so what Denise is referring to, if you have your policy in front of you, it would be section 3 of the policy. Sidewalk and Pathways Prioritization Committee recommends to the township board, property owners previously granted relief waivers to construct sidewalks that have road frontage along the designated streets as identified by the committee on March 12, 2018, need to be contacted and a plan be developed for a sidewalk to be constructed with 2 years.
Sorry, that should be within, but.
Other comments?
I like this plan. It'll at least get us to the point where we don't have people telling us that they don't want to put a sidewalk into nowhere or to another sidewalk. At least there's a plan, and the waivers is a great place to start. If people took it serious, they most likely know it's coming. So.
Yeah, and having the prioritized streets is really important, because before we were just kind of trying to do this, not without any sense, but I just think that having a group to,
When's the
this
township?
is helpful. So
Okay,
keep up the good work.
thank you. Is there anything else that you would like me to take back to the sidewalks committee? Well, I'll just continue to work.
Do you recommend the township hall to put sidewalk in?
Would
I'll
be
take that
nice.
back to the committee.
Yeah, we are near parks.
That would be
fairs.
nice.
We'll take it back.
Yeah.
Connect
Okay, thank you.
to the park.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to our agenda. Which got too many files here. So, other business, is there any other business that needs to come before us tonight? So we'll move on to extended public comment. We have a section of the meeting where individuals are invited to address the planning commission on any issue, whether it was on tonight's agenda or not. We ask people to identify themselves, give us your name and address for the minutes, and limit your comments to 5 minutes on any issue. Extended public comments open at 8:36. And hearing none, we'll go ahead and close that back up. And we'll move on to final board comment. Are there any comments from board members? I'll just take this opportunity to remind everyone that we are all invited to the annual joint meeting of Union Township boards. That's next Wednesday, and it's going to be at 6:30 here. No, it's not here, is it? It's at the Commission on Aging, because it's so big. And so over at the Commission on Aging, 6:30, next Wednesday, and that meeting will feature reports from the various groups, but it also will be the kickoff meeting with the firm that's been hired to do the review and revision of the zoning ordinance. So please come if you can. Other comments? If not, then we've completed our agenda for tonight, so we stand in adjournment until our September meeting.